Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to begin reading this book, Natural Wonders of the World. This book was donated to my channel by Jason Pepper. Thank you very much, Jason, for your very kind donation. If you want to check out my Amazon wish list, if you want to donate a book to my channel and give you a shout out, you can check it down below in the description box. But let's just dive right in. Carefully open this. It's a really big book, but it's so great. There's so many amazing pictures in it. So tonight, I don't know how far I'm going to get, but I'm going to attempt to read the North America chapter to you. There's lots of really cool little stuff about like geology and how all these land formations are formed basically, but I think we're going to read that on another day because they are really interesting, but it's a really long chapter. I'm just going to read all the little facts to you. So first, we're going to start off with the mountains, and we'll read about the Alaska Range. Stretching for some 400 miles like a crescent moon across south-central Alaska, this range appears as an awe-inspiring barrier of high snow-capped peaks. The loftiest mountains are clustered around Denali, a name given by the local Native American Koyukon people to the highest summit in the Alaska Range. The mountains act as a formidable obstruction to the flow of moist air from the Gulf of Alaska, which lies farther to the south, and as a result, they experience very high levels of snowfall. Due to this, the valleys in the range are filled with some large glaciers, such as the Black Rapids Glacier. These, along with the dramatic Arctic scenery, have made the Alaska Range a magnet for hikers. There's a picture of Denali right there, the largest mountain in North America. Next we have the Rocky Mountains. Here we go. The Rocky Mountains, or Rockies, extend for almost 3,000 miles, running southward from the northern part of British Columbia and Canada, and passing through parts of 6 U.S. states from Montana to New Mexico. Located within the range is North America's Continental Divide. To the west of this divide, rivers flow into the Pacific, and to the east they flow into the Atlantic or Arctic Oceans. The highest peak in the Rockies is Mount Elbert in Colorado at 14,440 feet. Shaping the Rockies. The Rockies mainly formed in stages over the last 80 million years and have a geologically complex history. The range contains many examples of folding and thrust faulting, for example in the Canadian Rockies and Montana. The Rockies also include areas such as Yellowstone National Park that have been extensively affected by volcanic activity, as well as regions impacted by glaciation during various ice ages. A number of the peaks are covered in coniferous forests with alpine tundra above the tree line. Many animals inhabit the Rocky Mountains, including elk, moose, mountain goats and sheep, bears, wolverines, and bald eagles. With its stunning scenery, this range is a popular leisure time destination, especially for activities such as camping, hiking, fishing, and mountain biking. Just from the Teton Range down here. Next, we have El Capitan and Half Dome, which there's El Capitan, very distinct mountain. Back here is Half Dome. You can't really see it. Really bad picture of Half Dome, but it's just like, imagine like a round mountain, but half of it's sliced off. The waterfall. It's so pretty. Let's read more about it. Here we go. Tens of millions of years ago, numerous rounded masses of igneous rock called plutons formed underground in what is now central California as enormous globs of magma rose from deep in Earth's crust and then cooled. Following several periods of uplift and erosion, many of these plutons are now visible above the surface as massive rock cliffs and outcrops. Two of the most famous, both located in Yosemite National Park, are El Capitan and Half Dome. imposing cliffs. El Capitan, or the Chief, is a granitic behemoth that is around 1 mile wide and some 2,950 feet from base to summit along its tallest face. It was given its name in 1851 by a roving Spanish militia force. Equally impressive, overlooking Yosemite Valley about 5 miles away, is Half Dome, named for its distinctive shape. One of its sides is a vertical face around 2,000 feet high, while the other 3 sides are smooth and round, making it appear from some angles like a dome cut in half. The 2 formations are famous for the challenge they pose to rock climbers. Once considered impossible to climb, El Capitan has now been conquered thousands of times over, and there are more than 70 different routes to the top of varying difficulty. At Half Dome, an 8-mile hiking route has been constructed to the top from the valley floor for non-rock climbers. This includes several hundred steps cut into the granite. Next is the Cascade Range, which you can see Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens is part of it. The Cascade Range is part of the Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped band of volcanoes and associated mountains that encloses the Pacific Ocean. Extending 680 miles, the Cascades formed over the last few million years as a result of the process of subduction as the Juan de Fuca oceanic plate slides underneath the North American plate. Volcanic hotbed. The Cascade Range includes many large and magnificent-looking volcanoes such as Mounts Baker, Rainier, and St. Helens in Washington, Mount Hood in Oregon, and Mount Shasta in California. Several Cascade volcanoes have erupted at least once in the last 200 years, and all volcanic eruptions during this period in the contiguous United States have been from Cascade volcanoes. So note there that contiguous United States means everything but Alaska and Hawaii. Oh, there's little maps on here too that show you where they are located in the world, or in North America in the case of this chapter. Next we have Crater Lake. And like I said, there's lots of cool little notes. We'll go over all those in another day. Today we're just going to read about all of them. So here's Crater Lake. Crater Lake in south central Oregon is one of the world's finest examples of a caldera volcano, a stratovolcano that has been partially collapsed, usually during the final phase of a catastrophic eruption, creating a gigantic cauldron-like depression called a caldera. A caldera is sometimes described as a large crater, but it is actually a type of sinkhole, since it forms as a result of collapse rather than explosion. Over time, a caldera often fills with water, resulting in a deep lake like Crater Lake. Collapse of a stratovolcano. The ancient stratovolcano from which Crater Lake caldera formed is called Mount Mazama. Before its top part collapsed, Mazama stood at around 12,000 feet, making it one of the highest peaks in the Cascade Range. During its eruption, which it talks about over here, again, another day, a column of pumice and ash reached some 30 miles high. In the final eruption phase, a circular system of cracks called a ring fracture opened around the volcano's lower slopes, causing its top to disintegrate. Following this event, volcanic activity continued for some time, creating relatively small volcanic features on the caldera floor. Sediments and material from landslides covered the floor, and the caldera gradually filled with water. Although no significant volcanic activity has been seen at Crater Lake for thousands of years, it is possible that in the future it may erupt again. It's one of the few places in this chapter I've been to, and if you've been to any, let me know in the comments. Next we have the San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas Fault is one of few places on Earth where the boundary between 2 tectonic plates can be seen running across land. Extending for approximately 810 miles through California, the San Andreas is known as a continental transform fault. Along the fault, the Pacific plate is slowly slipping past the North American plate. Each slippage, which typically occurs only along a section of the fault, is accompanied by an earthquake. A large tremor that devastated San Francisco in 1906 is the most famous quake associated with movements on the fault. And this is about 70 miles north of LA. It says you can see how it's scarred the earth right there. Interesting. Here is Yellowstone. Very volcanic and lots of geysers. Hot steam. Let's read about it. America's oldest national park, Yellowstone covers nearly 3,500 square miles of forest, grassland, mountains, lakes, and canyons. It contains the greatest concentration of geothermal features in the world, including geysers, colorful hot springs, and mud pools. Heat supply. Yellowstone's geothermal activity results from the fact that part of the area rests above a huge underground chamber of magma, which serves as a constant heat source. The features are arranged in distinct areas called geyser basins. Upper Geyser Basin contains around 150 geysers, including the famous Old Faithful and several colorful springs. Many of the geysers erupt more than 100 feet into the air. Plentiful rainfall seeps through Earth's crust and is heated by the magma chamber, providing a continuous hot water supply for the springs and geysers. Geological diversity. Rugged mountain scenery, deep glacier-carved valleys, waterfalls, canyons, and rich wildlife are among other interesting features of Yellowstone. The Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, as well as two waterfalls on the Yellowstone River, constitute some of the most dramatic attractions. Considered the world's largest intact ecosystem in the northern temperate region, Yellowstone is home to many large mammals such as American bison, wolves, black and grizzly bears, and moose. There's a cool page here, again another day, talking about the supervolcano under Yellowstone. Let's read about Ship Rock. You can see right there, North America, New Mexico. Let me slide a little closer for you guys. The most famous volcanic plug in the American Southwest, Ship Rock, towers 1,585 feet above a high desert plain in the Navajo Nation, a Native American territory in Arizona and New Mexico. Also called a volcanic neck, this type of feature originates when a mass of erosion-resistant rock forms inside a volcano after it has stopped erupting. Rock ribs. Regarded as a sacred monument by the Navajo people, Ship Rock's Navajo name is Tsebetai, which means winged rock. This probably alludes to the presence of prominent walls of volcanic rock called dikes that radiate from the monolith. The three most prominent of these rock ribs runs at roughly 120 degrees to each other. Seen from certain perspectives, the whole monument can have a bird-like appearance. Check that out. Isn't that remarkable? Very beautiful rock. Speaking of, here is Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower is one of the most iconic U.S. landmarks, often referred to as a butte, which is an isolated hill with vertical sides and a small flat top. Its exact origins are debated, in particular whether or not it formed inside a volcano. However, experts agree that it started off as a mass of magma that cooled and solidified underground. In the process, remarkably uniform polygonal columns formed in the cooling body, and this fluting is still visible today. I always thought it was a volcanic plug, but I guess not. Isn't that interesting? Regarded as a sacred spot by Native Americans, in 1906 it became the first site in the U.S. to be declared a national monument. It is also famous as the location for a climactic meeting between humans and visitors from space in the 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Remarkable movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. That's when it was formed, right there, but again, another day. It's really interesting. Tonight we're just going to read. Let's read about the Appalachians. The Appalachians are the eroded remnants of an ancient mountain belt that formed about 500 million years ago through collisions between ancient continents. Over the last 65 million years, the whole belt has been uplifted and eroded to what is seen today, a vast area of gently rounded, mostly forested hills and mountains. It consists of many parallel provinces, including the Blue Ridge Mountains, noted for a bluish haze when seen from a distance. The color is in part due to a chemical released into the air by trees in the region. This looks like a painting. It's so unreal. What a beautiful part of the world. Next we have the Cave of Crystals. The Cave of Crystals lies 980 feet below a mountain at Naica in northern Mexico. In April 2000, workers at the Naica mine were excavating a new tunnel when they discovered the Cave of Crystals. The chamber is filled with gigantic beam-like crystals of the mineral selenite. Birth of Giants. The cave, which has eroded out of the limestone that forms much of the Naica mountain, has existed for several thousand years. At some point after its formation, when it was flooded with water, mineral-rich groundwater rising from below came into contact with cooler, oxygen-rich surface water in the vicinity of the cave. The oxygen diffused into the groundwater, causing the selenite to be deposited in the form of crystals. This continued at an extremely slow rate for at least 500,000 years, forming the gigantic crystals that exist today. Terra incognita. The cave is relatively unexplored because of its depth and the continued presence of heated water below the surface. And temperatures can reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit, and at present, the cave lacks public access. It's the most incredible thing. This is a person, and this is all selenite. Oh, it's so intense. I'd really love to see it one day, but like they talk about, it's pretty impossible. Only really scientists can get into there because it's so hot and chemically, I suppose. Let's read about the Sierra Madre. Mexico's Sierra Madre has three main parts: the Sierra Madre Occidental in northwest Mexico, the Sierra Madre Oriental in the northeast, and the Sierra Madre del Sur in the south. Between the Occidental and Oriental ranges lies the Mexican Plateau. This consists of layers of sedimentary rock laid down in shallow seas 250 to 65 million years ago that have subsequently been eroded into an angular, gouged landscape in the Sierra Madre Occidental and a more rounded terrain in the Oriental. Parts of the range also show signs of past volcanism in the form of igneous rock intrusions and layers of hardened lava poured out by long-disappeared volcanoes. Labyrinthine landscape. This has been so gorgeous. The western side of the Sierra Madre Occidental is a series of high escarpments, which are steep slopes that form due to faulting or erosion, whose sides drop into deep canyons called barrancas. The dimensions of some of these, notably the Copper Canyon, or Barrancas del Cobre, are comparable to those of the Grand Canyon in the U.S. The Sierra Madre Oriental is cut through by many steep-walled narrow valleys. Many of these are aligned in the north-south direction, but there are also several passages through these mountains that run from the lowlands of the Gulf of Mexico to the east. The Sierra Madre del Sur consists of a labyrinth of narrow ridges and steep-flanked valleys. And down here, speaking of, Popocatépetl, towering to a height of 18,491 feet, Popocatépetl, which means smoking mountain in the ancient Aztec language, is famous because of the ferocity of its eruptions. Its tongue-twisting name and its proximity to Greater Mexico City, the largest metropolitan area in the Americas. I don't think I read this sentence right. Is famous. Oh, that was all one sentence. Okay, that's why. My bad. Violent nature. A stratovolcano, Popocatépetl, or El Popo, can be seen erupting for most parts of Mexico City. Over the past few thousand years, it has had 3 Plinian eruptions, extremely violent blasts that produce huge plumes of gas and ash. Such explosions can cause large loss of life in populated areas. After a massive eruption in 1947, the volcano lay dormant until it came back to life in 1994. Ever since, the smoke has been seen emanating almost daily from its huge summit crater. The year 2000 saw the most dramatic eruption in more than 1,000 years. In April 2016, it erupted again, spewing out lava, ash, and rock, and it has continued to produce powerful explosions at irregular intervals. El Popo. Right, that's it for the mountain section. Let's move on to the glaciers and ice sheets. Here's the Greenland Ice Sheet, which is nearly all of Greenland. There we go. The Greenland Ice Sheet is the world's second largest ice sheet and second largest glacier after the Antarctic Ice Sheet, covering 660,000 square miles of Greenland. It has an estimated volume of 680,000 cubic miles with an average thickness of about 5,480 feet and a maximum thickness of 10,515 feet. Some of its ice is thought to be up to 110,000 years old. Shape and movement. The ice sheet's surface, that's really hard for me to say, ice sheet. Surface is slightly domed, reaching a height of about 10,800 feet above sea level at the top of the dome. From here, ice moves slowly down toward the ice sheet's edges, where it is mostly constrained by coastal mountains. It only reaches the sea along a broad front in a few places. As a result, Greenland, unlike Antarctica, has no ice shelves. In many places, the ice flows through gaps in the mountains in the form of outlet glaciers. When these reach the coast, they discharge enormous numbers of icebergs into the sea. One outlet glacier, the Jakobshavn Glacier in western Greenland, is the world's fastest flowing glacier. At its sea end, the ice flows about 3 feet per hour. Threats to sea level and fresh water. The Greenland ice sheet is melting due to global warming. If it melted completely, the world's oceans would rise by about 24 feet, drowning many of the world's major cities and leading to loss of about 6.5% of the world's fresh water reserves. Wow. Check this out. Isn't that remarkable? Look at the helicopter. Meltwater streams. Oh, melting. Next we have the Columbia Glacier. The Columbia Glacier is one of Alaska's largest glaciers, with an area of about 360 square miles and a length of 25 miles. It descends from the Chugach Mountains in southern Alaska to Prince William Sound, an inlet to the Gulf of Alaska, where it calves large numbers of icebergs into the sea. You know what's funny? I rehearsed this book beforehand, right? And then I randomly went back and watched one of my Google Earth tablet ones, and we go here by accident. You see this part right here at the Chugach Mountains. And I was like, what is this? It's so weird. It was the glacier. A shrinking record. The Columbia Glacier is one of the fastest moving in North America, but its fast forward movement is offset by extremely rapid calving of icebergs at its terminus, at a rate of some 14 million tons every day. As a result, since the 1960s, the glacier's terminus has moved backward. Since 2011, it has become detached from some of its largest tributary glaciers. The retreat cannot be attributed solely to global warming, as other nearby glaciers are not shrinking at the same pace. Instead, experts believe it is connected to the shape of the bedrock channel under the glacier. Very, very interesting. Look at that. All melty. Next is the Bering Glacier. Look at this. So neat. And there's some icebergs down here breaking off from it. Let's read about it right here. There we go. The Bering Glacier is around 111 miles long and flows down from Alaska's Chugach Mountains toward the Gulf of Alaska. In parts, the ice is about 2,600 feet thick. The glacier has two very different main parts. The upper part, known as Bagley Icefield, lies at an altitude of 3/4 to 1 1/4 miles and is a vast basin of clean ice formed from compaction of fallen snow. This ice field is about 56 miles long and completely fills several interconnecting valleys. The lower part is a broad trunk of ice ending in a 26-mile wide, roughly oval terminal lobe, which is partly covered in rock debris and vegetation. A large lake of meltwater, Vitus Lake, fringes in the glacier's terminus. From this lake and the edge of the terminal lobe, streams flow a short distance to the coast, which is on the Gulf of Alaska. I wonder if that's what this is right here. Does it talk about it? The Bagley Icefield. And the terminal lobe right here. Okay. Lots of terms to learn about glaciers. Like, you'll learn some of this one at the Kaskawulsh Glacier. Around 400 square miles in area, the Kaskawulsh Glacier snakes for some 45 miles through the St. Elias Mountains of Canada's Yukon Territory. Make sure you can see all of it there. At its terminus, or snout, it produces meltwater that maintains the level of one of the Yukon's largest lakes, Kluane Lake. The bold stripes. All glaciers constrained by valleys have dark bands of material running along their sides called lateral moraines. These contain rock fragments that have been plucked off the walls of the valley and are being carried along by the glacier. Isn't that so interesting? Look at it. When two glaciers merge to form a larger glacier, the lateral moraines of the smaller glaciers typically combine to form a bold dark stripe running down the merged glacier. The stripe is called a medial moraine. The lower half of the Kaskawulsh Glacier has several bold medial moraines formed through a series of mini mergers of its different arms or tributaries upstream. The glacier has three main arms, each with its own tributaries. So many interesting facts about glaciers that I didn't know before reading this book. Here's the Malaspina Glacier. Isn't that beautiful? The enormous Malaspina Glacier is up to 40 miles wide and extends up to 28 miles forward from where its ice route emerges from between a gap in some mountains near the coast of Alaska. Studies of earthquake waves passing through it have shown that its ice is up to 2,000 feet thick. Patterned lobe. The glacier has complex patterns of light and dark bands on its surface. The dark areas are moraines containing rock debris. The bands are arranged in zigzags and swirls and are thought to have been caused by alternating, perhaps seasonal patterns of fast and slow ice flow. Also on the surface are colonies of tiny creatures called ice worms. Ooh, okay. And here is the Black Rapids Glacier. Isn't that a remarkable picture? Oh my gosh. Read about the Black Rapids Glacier. The Black Rapids Glacier flows down a valley in south-central Alaska and is one of the world's more accessible glaciers because its snout lies only a few miles from a road. It's about 25 miles long and has several tributaries. In 2002, an earthquake caused a huge part of it to be buried in rock debris. The Black Rapids is a surge-type glacier in which periodic rapid transfers of ice occur from the upper to the lower parts, which increase in thickness and then surge forward. The Black Rapids Glacier made national news in the U.S. for 3 months in 1937, when its ice suddenly began moving at 100 feet a day, more than 20 times its normal rate, and its snout began to rapidly advance down its valley. During this period, it became known as the Galloping Glacier. Since this surge, however, the Black Rapids has steadily retreated to its current length, which is at a historic minimum. Let's see what's next. We have very beautiful Kennecott Glacier. The Kennecott Glacier flows down from the southern Wrangell Mountains, its principal source of ice being the flanks of Mount Blackburn, a snow-clad, eroded, extinct volcano and the 5th highest peak in the U.S. The glacier is almost 26 miles long. Arms and tributaries. The upper part of the Kennecott Glacier has two arms, west and east, that flow around a ridge of rock and a nunatak, or a small rocky peak poking through the ice, known as Pack Saddle Island. After these two arms have joined, the impressively striped main trunk of the glacier flows south, where it merges with two large tributaries, the Gates and Root Glaciers, and later passes an abandoned mining community called Kennecott. It ends in a broad rock-covered snout, surrounded by shallow meltwater pools and lakes. Several streams emerge from underneath the glacier and merge to form the Kennecott River. The Kennecott Glacier and Root Glacier are accessible from a road built to supply the old mining camp. Guided hikes into the glaciers provide a chance to view the ice formations, as well as vivid blue pools and streams on the glacier's surfaces, or to explore the ice caves underneath them. Crossing the Root Glacier gives access to Donoho Peak. A strenuous scramble up this can give brilliant views of the whole area. Very cool. Next we have the Mendenhall Glacier, which very incredible picture, right? Oh my gosh. Let's read about it. The Mendenhall is one of 38 large glaciers that flow down off the Juneau icefield. The glacier is about 13 miles long and ends in an iceberg-filled lake. It has been retreating and shrinking since at least the 1700s, with some phases of rapid retreat in recent years, and it is expected that it will recede out of the lake by about 2020. I wonder if that's happened. Exploring the glacier. By paddling a canoe across the meltwater lake, it is possible to reach the side of the glacier's terminus, to clamber across its surface, and then explore its ice caves with their deep blue ceilings and streams of water running over the rocks inside. Wildlife in the area includes bears, spawning salmon in season, and the occasional wolverine. Let's move on to the Margaret Glacier. Did you know there are so many different glaciers up in Alaska? The Margaret Glacier originates from the eastern end of the St. Elias Mountains in southeastern Alaska and discharges icebergs into Glacier Bay, an inlet of the Gulf of Alaska. Glaciers that flow down to the sea are called tidewater glaciers. The Margaret Glacier's terminal wall is in Tar Inlet at the northern end of the bay and is 260 feet high. Unlike most other Alaskan glaciers, it has not retreated in recent years. Really interesting. History of the bay. Glacier Bay was entirely filled with a single massive glacier when the English naval officer Captain George Vancouver discovered it in 1794. But due to higher temperatures and slower average snowfall over the last few centuries, this has been transformed into a 60-mile-long fjord with many smaller glaciers feeding ice and meltwater into it, including the Margaret. Alright, we're moving on from glaciers. Time to talk about rivers and lakes. The first one is the Yukon, which is another really beautiful. All the pictures in this are so beautiful, but how fun is that? Let's read about the Yukon. The Yukon River is 1,980 miles long, making it the third longest river in North America after the Missouri and Mississippi. 8 major rivers flow into the Yukon, and its tributaries drain an area of about 328,000 square miles, the fourth largest drainage basin in North America. Epic journey. From its mountain source in British Columbia, the Yukon flows slowly northwest through the lowland forests of the Yukon Territory before entering Alaska, where it widens into a vast wetland area called the Yukon Flats. From here, its lower course turns southwest to wind across the entire breadth of the relatively flat central Alaska landscape to its mouth in the Bering Sea. The vast scale of the Yukon and the remoteness of the landscapes that it crosses have led to the romantic mythology of frontier life associated with its name. Once the principal means of transportation for the pioneers of the Klondike Gold Rush at the turn of the 19th century, The river remains an epic watercourse for those with an adventurous spirit. Look at that. Imagine trying to raft through that, my goodness. And next is Lake Abraham, which stunning picture there. Lake Abraham is an artificial lake created by the damming of the North Saskatchewan River in northern Alberta, Canada in 1972. It stretches 20 miles, oriented north to south along the river valley, and is 2 miles across at its widest. What lies beneath? For much of the year, Lake Abraham displays the turquoise water seen in most glacial lakes of the Canadian Rockies. However, during winter, beneath its clear icy surface, bizarre frozen stacks of cotton wool-like bubbles appear. These amazing formations actually contain highly flammable methane gas produced as bacteria at the bottom of the lake. As bacteria at the bottom of the lake decompose dead organic material. In summer, the methane simply rises to the surface and escapes, but in winter the gas is trapped and held on dazzling display until the spring thaw. So neat. The Great Lakes, what a remarkable photo. Which lake is this? This is Lake Erie. What a wave, my goodness. And then frozen lakes and one of the highlands in Lake Superior. Oh, there you go, the islands in Lake Superior. The Great Lakes. North America's Great Lakes have a combined surface area of 94,000 square miles, exceeding that of the UK, and contain 1/5 of the world's fresh surface water. The system comprises 5 interconnected lakes: Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, draining from west to east and emptying into the Atlantic Ocean via the St. Lawrence River. Although the gradient between the lakes is generally shallow, the descent between Lakes Erie and Ontario features the dramatic Niagara Falls. Diverse shorelines. The Great Lakes began to form at the end of the last ice age, when moving ice sheets gouged huge basins and subsequently filled with water as the ice melted. The current shapes of the lake started to become established about 10,000 years ago. Their shorelines vary considerably, from sandy beaches to rocky cliffs and even wetlands. Also located on their shores are several major cities, including Toronto, Chicago, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Detroit. And speaking of, there's Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is a system of 3 waterfalls located on the Niagara River, through which water flows from Lake Erie into Lake Ontario. The falls lie on the Canada-US border and form the southern end of the Niagara Gorge. The Horseshoe Falls, the largest of the 3, has a dramatic crest line that is 2,200 feet wide and a vertical drop of more than 188 feet into a plunge pool 115 feet deep. Separated by Goat Island, the American Falls and the diminutive Bridal Veil Falls crash down 66 to 115 feet into a talus, a slope of rocks, formed by a huge rock slide in 1954. At peak times, about 45 million gallons of water pass over the 3 falls each minute. Cutting back. Niagara Falls was formed as the Niagara River plunged over a huge escarpment on its way to the Atlantic Ocean. In a process that continues today, the river eroded layers of soft rock sitting below a harder dolomite cap rock. As the soft layers eroded, undercutting the dolomite above, great chunks of the cap rock gave way, leaving a vertical cliff face. Here we have the Mississippi, Missouri. The Mississippi-Missouri River system is the largest watershed in North America, draining more than 40% of the contiguous U.S., which explains what that means again. The Mississippi River sources Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota, which it leaves as a stream just 10 feet wide. The Mississippi's western tributaries, including those of the Missouri, drain the Great Plains, while those to the east drain the Appalachian Plateau. Great River. In combination, the Mississippi-Missouri stretches 3,710 miles, making it the fourth longest river in the world after the Nile, Amazon, and Yangtze. Also known as the Big Muddy, the silt-laden Missouri discharges into the clearer Mississippi just north of St. Louis in Missouri, where I've been. It's one of the places I've been. However, it is only after its confluence with the Ohio River, the Mississippi's largest tributary by volume, at Cairo, Illinois, that the river takes on the full grandeur that led Algonquin-speaking inhabitants to name it Mississippi, Great River. The Grand Canyon. Here we go. One of North America's most iconic landscapes. The Grand Canyon is a spectacular valley carved into the Colorado Plateau by the Colorado River over millions of years. Renowned for its dramatic rock formations, precipitous cliffs, and striking coloration, the canyon is named for its impressive scale, averaging 4,000 feet deep for its entire length of 277 miles. It drops 6,000 feet below the rim at its deepest and reaches 18 miles across at its widest. A record in the walls. An extraordinary demonstration of the powerful forces of erosion. The Grand Canyon is one of Earth's best studied geological features. The layers of rock exposed on its walls present a remarkable record of geological history, reaching back almost 2 billion years, although the canyon itself is much younger. Let's take a look. I think everyone knows what the Grand Canyon looks like, but it's so remarkable, right? So breathtaking. We'll read about all the details about it another day. Let's read about the Carlsbad Caverns. Beneath the Chihuahuan Desert in the Guadalupe Mountains, New Mexico, lies a series of massive underground chambers and passages decorated with stalactites and stalagmites. The caverns formed through an unusual process in which groundwater, rich in sulfuric acid, invaded and dissolved the limestone rock on a huge scale. Only later did percolating rainwater enter the resulting caves and furnish their interiors with the elaborate calcite formations seen today. The famous Big Room, a rambling chamber up to 625 feet wide in places, contains many remarkable features, including the Hall of Giants, a series of gigantic stalagmites rising almost 65 feet from the cave floor, and the painted grotto, colored by iron oxide and hydroxide pigments. So amazing. Look at this. Oh, the little bitty details from erosion. Gorgeous. Next we have the Okeefenokee Swamp. Straddling the border between Georgia and Florida, the Okeefenokee Swamp is a large, shallow wetland area lying in a basin that was once beneath the Atlantic Ocean. The swamp is dominated by peat-filled mires, but also contains lakes, flooded prairies, and mixed woodlands. With an area of 685 square miles, it is considered the largest black water swamp in North America. Although its waters are free of sediment, they are stained a dark color by tannins released by peat and decomposing vegetation. Over the 7,000 years that the swamp has been forming, peat has collected to depths of more than 15 feet. In some areas, floating sections shudder when trodden on. Translated from Hichiti language, Okeefenokee means water shaking. The swamp is drained by 2 rivers. The Suwannee River flows into the Gulf of Mexico, while the St. Mary's River empties into the Atlantic. Flourishing wildlife. A great variety of animals and plants thrive in the Okeefenokee Swamp's mosaic of habitats. A haven for more than 230 bird species, including many wading birds and waterfowl, the swamp is well known for its abundance of amphibians and reptiles, including alligators, snakes, and the alligator snapping turtle, the world's largest freshwater turtle. It is also a key habitat for a population of Florida black bears and home to other mammals, including bobcats and otters. More than 600 plant species include the carnivorous sundews, bladderworts, and pitcher plants. developed their unusual diets to compensate for the nutrient-poor soils. And of course, after we talk about Okeefenokee, we have to talk about the Everglades. Located at the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula, the Everglades is a vast wetland wilderness containing a variety of lowland habitats. Much of the inland area is covered by the famous sawgrass prairies that are permanently inundated with water. The so-called River of Grass, which also contains lakes, waterways, or sloughs, and cypress marshes at its edges, is dependent on fires, usually started by lightning strikes, for maintenance and regeneration. Islands of hardwood forests, known as hammocks, contain a mixture of trees including tropical mahogany and temperate oaks and maples, while some of the highest areas, including dry ridges, are covered in South Florida slash pine. Its coastal areas, where fresh water and salt water merge, salt marshes and tidal mangroves dominate. The combined mangrove system of the Everglades lining the coast, creeks, and estuaries is the largest in the Western Hemisphere. Critical habitats. A major migration stopover, the Everglades is home to more than 400 species of birds. Some 50 species of reptiles live in the area, and it is the only place in the world where alligators and crocodiles coexist. The wetland provides critical habitats for many threatened and endangered species, like sweet manatees. Next we have Thors Well. We're on to coasts, islands, and reefs. So first up is Thors Well. Situated in an area of coast called Cape Perpetua, Thors Well is circular in shape, about 20 feet deep, and has a hole at the bottom that connects with the open sea. As the waves crash in at high tide, the well fills up, overflows, and spouts seawater into the air. The water is then sucked back for several seconds, making it appear as if the sea is being drained. So cool. Churning chasm. Thors Well churns most spectacularly around the time of high tide. The stirring action depends on the height of the high tide and the direction and size of the waves. The wind can also be a factor. During storms, water can burst out of the well extremely violently, making it too dangerous to approach closely. And here is Madre Bay, which I have to be careful because with my accent we say Monterey. Monterey. We basically just drop these two letters, Monterey. Monterey Bay occupies a large stretch of the coast of central California. Underwater is a thick forest of kelp, you can see here, and the shore end of one of the world's longest undersea canyons, which runs for 60 miles to the southwest. Around the bay are some pristine beaches and jewel-like tide pools. Marine Sanctuary. Offshore, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary covers a much larger area of around 6,100 square miles. It is home to a fantastic diversity of sea life, including more than 30 species of mammals, over 300 species of fish, and nearly 100 bird species. Next is Big Sur. Widely regarded as one of the most spectacular meetings of sea and land in the world, Big Sur is a roughly 100-mile-long section of undeveloped wild coastline. Some sections of the hillsides just above the shoreline have been shaped into flat areas called marine terraces. These are former beaches lifted up by tectonic activity. A winding, narrow road extends down its length, affording spectacular views of the Pacific. The road and Big Sur in general, however, are susceptible to landslides as a result of wave action, weakening of the cliffs by faulting and fracturing, the destruction of vegetation by summer fires, and heavy winter rainfall. It's so beautiful. Definitely, if you're ever driving down Highway 1 in California, you gotta stop and check out Big Sur. Next is the Bay of Fundy. There we go. Located on Canada's east coast, the Bay of Fundy is a unique coastal environment with a landscape of breathtaking cliffs, sea caves, and unusual rock formations. The rock layers and outcrops around the bay display an enormous geological diversity and range of ages. They tell a story of hundreds of millions of years of natural history with, for example, dinosaur discoveries from the Triassic period and fossils of marine invertebrates from the Carboniferous period. Massive tides. High cliffs channel the tidal waves flowing into the bay until they separate into two narrow arms called the Chignecto Bay and the Minas Basin at its northeastern end. This channeling effect and the bay's overall shape give rise to some of the world's fastest running tides and highest tidal ranges. The difference between high and low tides, the highest ever being a range of 71 feet, recorded one night in October 1869 at Burnt Coat Head in the Minas Basin. I said that really fast, I'm sorry. The tidal surge in the northern arm, Chignecto Bay, produces a bore up to 6 feet. The twice-daily tides transform the shorelines, tidal flats, and exposed sea bottom as they flood into the bay and its harbors. They also create unique conditions for whales and seabirds. That is a really interesting formation. You can imagine this all being covered by water, then it all recedes out, and you get all of this to explore. So cool. There's meandering channels. Let's read about the Acadia coastline. Forming part of the coast of Maine, Acadia National Park consists principally of one large island, Mount Desert Island, and several smaller islands nearby. It is best known for its distinctive rocky coastline, the result of a complex series of geological processes over hundreds of millions of years. These include the intrusion of magma into existing sedimentary rock layers about 360 million years ago to form granite masses. Sorry, this page makes a really weird squeaky noise. If I brush against it the wrong way, I have to be careful. Anyway, from about 2 million years ago, a huge ice sheet blanketed the area and sculpted out a series of mountains separated by U-shaped valleys. Today, waves and tides are major agents of change at Acadia, gradually eroding cliffs and depositing the debris as sediments around the coastline. Look at this, also looks like a painting. That's so peaceful and beautiful. And next, looks like we're on to forests now. The North American boreal forest. It's stunning. There's a bobby cat. Boreal forests, or taiga, is the world's largest terrestrial biome, consisting of vast expanses of mostly conifer species. In North America alone, 2 million square miles of boreal forest stretches from Alaska to Newfoundland, and from the Great Lakes as far as the Arctic tundra. Cold climate forest. The boreal forest is also known as a snow forest due to its climate. Short, humid summers of 50 to 100 frost-free days are followed by long, cold winters with up to 6 months of temperatures below freezing. Precipitation falls mainly as snow. Conifers such as spruce are well adapted to survive with rigorous conditions, and they dominate the landscape. Lakes, rivers, and wetlands are numerous, making the North American boreal forest Earth's largest source of unfrozen fresh water. Because it is still relatively intact, this is a vital habitat for wildlife such as moose and brown bears, and a breeding ground for up to 3 billion North American birds. Oh, sorry, that's a lynx. That's a Canadian lynx. It's not a bobcat. But it certainly looks like one, doesn't it? My apologies. Next we have the Pacific Northwest rainforest. Coastal temperate rainforests are a very rare forest type. Today they are believed to cover just 116,700 square miles, less than 0.2% of Earth's land area. Oceans, mountains, and high rainfall are features of these forests, and the largest intact areas stretch from northern California to Canada and the Gulf of Alaska. The Pacific Northwest measures annual rainfall in feet, and 8 to 14 feet is not unusual. Constantly decaying cedar, Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, and coast redwood needles and deciduous leaves create a rich soil that supports hundreds of moss, fern, and invertebrate species, while rivers, lakes, and streams are home to salmon and trout, which in turn attract bears and bald eagles. There's a little sluggy slug there. Next we have the giant forest. Growing at the heart of central California's Sequoia National Park in the southern Sierra Nevada mountains, the giant forest is home to more than 8,000 giant sequoias. While they may not be the world's tallest trees, they are easily the largest by volume. A tale of two redwoods. Giant sequoias are often called redwoods and vice versa, but while both species are native to California and share similar cinnamon-colored bark and heady heights, they are decidedly different. The trees of the giant forest generally grow at elevations of 4,900 to 6,900 feet on western Sierra Nevada slopes, making them much more cold-hardy than coast redwoods, which grow at lower coastal elevations. Giant sequoias live for around 3,000 years, as opposed to the redwoods' 2,000, and their bark is up to 2 feet thick. Sequoias do not grow as tall as redwoods. The maximum is around 310 feet, compared to the redwoods' 380 feet, but what they lack in height is made up for in girth. The largest tree in the world, the giant forest's General Sherman, stands at 275 feet high but is more than 100 feet wide and weighs an estimated 1,350 tons. At 52,513 cubic feet, it is the single largest living organism by volume in the world. And this is not General Sherman, this is the president, which there's a person for scale. They are absolutely massive, massive trees. Let's move on to the Pando Aspen Grove. It contains what seem to be around 47,000 individual trees, but the Pando Grove of central Utah is in fact one giant living organism, a clonal colony of quaking aspen. All of its trees are genetically identical, and all began as ramets or suckers, growing from and sharing a single root system. Ancient roots. Aspen clonal colonies are common in North America. What makes Pando, Latin for ice bread, special is its size. It sprawls over 108 acres, with an estimated weight of 6,615 tons. Pando's accepted age is also unusual. Although individual trunks live around 100 to 150 years, the clonal root system is thought to be at least 80,000 years old. Some scientists, however, believe that the figure could be closer to 1 million. Recently, Pando's survival has been threatened because deer and moose eat its ramets. Part of the forest is now fenced off so that new suckers grow undisturbed. Right, next is the Cherokee National Forest. The Cherokee National Forest follows Tennessee's state border with North Carolina, covering around 1,015 square miles of the Appalachian Mountains' eastern slopes. Because the southern Appalachians were not covered by glaciers during the last ice age, diverse plant and animal species flourished, and the forests that covered the mountains provided a relatively isolated habitat until the mid-19th century. The Cherokee Forest is a natural sanctuary with more than 20,000 plant and animal species. Beech, hickory, sassafras, birch, maple, and numerous types of oaks are just some of the forest's common trees, attracting more than 120 bird species, including the threatened red-cockaded woodpecker. Next, the beautiful fall trees of the Green Mountain National Forest. Vermont's Green Mountain National Forest consists of more than 625 square miles spread over and around the mountains that share its name. Many of the peaks in the forest are over 2,950 feet, and the spruce, maple, beech, and paper birch that cover them make the region a popular tourist destination, particularly in fall, when the forest becomes a blaze of color. Softwood as well as hardwood tree species flourish in the region, and these, coupled with a dense understory fed by mountain streams and winter snowfall, provide food and shelter for a wide variety of bird and other animal species. Beavers, moose, deer, and wild turkeys are common, as well as gray wolves and black bears. Next we have the North American tundra, which, look at it, it's stunning. It's so wild. Let's read about the North American tundra. In North America, tundra covers northern Alaska, the U.S., extends eastward through northern Canada, and forms a narrow band around the coast of Greenland. North of the Arctic Circle, this ecoregion is known as Arctic tundra, while in the mountains above the timberline, it is classified as alpine tundra. Challenging conditions. Arctic tundra conditions are the coldest. Summer high temperatures are just 40 degrees Fahrenheit, plunging to negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit or below in winter. The alpine tundra climate is less extreme. Summers may reach 54 degrees Fahrenheit, while winters rarely fall below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. However, in both cases, this is mainly a treeless landscape where vegetation hugs the ground to survive freezing winds that contribute to blizzard conditions in winter, especially on alpine tundra. Elsewhere, the constantly frozen underlying ground layer called permafrost blocks the movement of water through the soil during the summer thaw, turning some low-lying Arctic tundra areas into bogs. Despite these challenges, almost 2,000 plant species grow in the tundra, primarily grasses, sedges, mosses, and shrubs. All are shallow-rooted to cope with the tundra's thin active soil layer and to survive the region's freeze-thaw cycle. Flowering plants such as saxifrage, I've never heard of that, saxifrage bloom vigorously during the brief summer, while mosses and lichens provide vital nourishment in lean months for mammals such as reindeer and Arctic hares. In areas where the soil is slightly deeper and richer, mat-forming shrubs such as bilberry and crowberry produce fruit in summer that may last beneath winter snows until the following spring. So neat. We are on the grasslands and tundra section. We're going to talk about the Great Plains. Looks like a tornado's forming there. At around 3,000 miles long and 310 to 680 miles wide, the vast grassland known as the Great Plains covers the heart of the North American continent. It slopes gently downward from the Rocky Mountains east of the Mississippi River and stretches from southern Canada as far south as Texas. Types of prairies. Once immense seas of grass known as prairies, much of the Great Plains today consists of seemingly endless fields of grain, primarily corn and wheat, planted on the most fertile soil. Other sections have been converted to cattle ranching. The natural grassland that remains consists of short grass and bunch grass in the drier west, giving way to medium grass and tall grass prairie in central and eastern regions that receive more rainfall. Tall grass prairie is among the world's rarest ecosystems. It is dominated by up to 60 different grass species, some of which reach heights of up to 8 feet, towering over an understory of flowers, lichens, and liverworts. These support a wide range of wildlife, from tiny western harvest mice and shrews to coyotes. All prairies are fragile habitats, and various programs are underway to preserve them. Next we have the Great Basin Desert. Some salt flats here. With an area of about 200,000 square miles, the Great Basin is the largest desert in North America. I didn't know that. It lies mainly in Nevada and western Utah, but stretches into California and Idaho. I see. It's very big then. Classified as a cold desert, the Great Basin's elevations range from 3,900 to 9,800 feet. The Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountain ranges block moisture from the Pacific Ocean and Gulf of Mexico, forming a rain shadow area. So the average annual precipitation of only 12 inches is only 12 inches and usually arrives as snow. A single wet year can often be followed by many years of drought. Habitats here vary greatly, with mountaintop islands of bristlecone or pinyon and juniper forests separated by sagebrush-filled valleys or arid salt lakes. In some places the soil is so salty that no plants can survive. Then we have the Mojave Desert. You can see a big old Joshua tree here. North America's smallest, driest desert is sandwiched between the cold Great Basin Desert to the north and the hot Sonoran Desert to the south. Due to its proximity to two contrasting desert areas, experts rarely agree on the Mojave's boundaries, size, or type. Levels of extremes. Badwater Basin in the Mojave's Death Valley lies 282 feet below sea level, the continent's lowest point, yet Telescope Peak in the Panamint Range soars 11,043 feet above it. North America's highest air temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded here at Furnace Creek in 1913, yet winter temperatures regularly drop below freezing. Winds above 50 miles per hour often buffet the Mojave's western edge, but are rare in the east. In the north, low-growing scrubland resembles the Great Basin Desert, but to the south, creosote bush takes hold. The Joshua tree, the largest North American yucca, is a symbol of the Mojave and is often used by ecologists as an indicator of the desert's southern boundary. Death Valley is also home to sailing stones, boulders that appear to move unaided. You can see them moving down there. Next we have the Sonoran Desert, which pretty iconic desert in my opinion with the big cacti. A place of transition between temperate and tropical climates, the Sonoran Desert merges into the Chihuahuan Desert to the southeast and the Mojave to the northwest. Calderas bear witness to the prehistoric volcanic eruptions that created the desert's mountain ranges, valleys, and alluvial fans known as bajadas. The Sonoran's annual rainfall of 3 to 20 inches, the most in any North American desert, supports over 2,000 plant species. These must survive average summer temperatures of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, but winters are relatively mild at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, with few frosts. And another very iconic place, Monument Valley. Part of the Colorado Plateau, Monument Valley is a high elevation desert, averaging about 5,600 feet above sea level. It is located in one of the Southwest's driest and least populated areas across Utah and Arizona. During the last 50 million years, wind and water have eroded what was once an even higher plateau, peeling away layers of shale, sandstone, and conglomerate. What remains are incredible stone formations, 400 to 980 feet high. Settlers in the 19th century considered the desert terrain hostile, and this, along with its harsh climate and isolated location in Navajo Nation-owned land, saved it from exploitation. Today, all of Monument Valley is owned by the Navajo Nation, which restricts visitors to a 17-mile road tour and one hiking trail. It's very like Wild West, right? Next we have Bryce Canyon, which is so beautiful. I say that about every picture, but that's a really neat one. Bryce is not a conventional canyon because it was not created by flowing water cutting through rock. However, an ancient lake that once covered much of what is now southwestern Utah did play a role in its formation. The process began 55 to 35 million years ago. A sea of stone totems. Mineral-rich sediment from surrounding mountains was washed down by rainfall and deposited on the lake's base, eventually turning into the pink limestone that geologists today know as the Claron Formation. Geological upheaval forced the lake bed upward, by nearly 1 mile to create a plateau. Millennia of weathering and erosion subsequently carved the Clairon Formation first into cliffs, then into tall columns of rock, some a mere 5 feet tall, others rising as high as 150 feet. Known as hoodoos, these multicolored towers contain sections of varying thicknesses and are composed mainly of limestone, but with silt and mudstone as well. Minerals such as iron oxide and manganese oxide adds pink, purple, and blue tints. The different hues and lumpy, unequal shapes of the stone spires remind some visitors of wooden totem poles. Freezing and thawing. While hoodoos occur on every continent, they are more common in the northern part of Bryce Canyon than anywhere else on Earth. This is partly due to the region's climate. On average, Bryce Canyon undergoes 200 freeze-thaw cycles a year. Temperatures rise above freezing point during the day but drop below it at night, causing any meltwater that has seeped into the rock to freeze and expand. Known as frost wedging, this process shatters stone, reshaping it into the hoodoos that the Paiute Indians, who settled the area around 1200 CE, named the Legend People. As frost wedging continues, many Legend People collapse each year. That's sad. Next we have Meteor Crater. A massive bowl-shaped cavity carved into the Arizona desert, Meteor Crater is one of the most studied meteorite craters on Earth. Its shape has been remarkably well preserved, and it is comparatively young for an impact site. Nearly 1 mile across, more than 550 feet deep, and with a circumference of 2.5 miles, the depression known as Meteor Crater was initially believed to be an extinct volcano. It was not until the early 20th century that it was identified as having been created by an extraterrestrial impact, and details about its origins are still being discovered. Around 50,000 years ago, a meteorite estimated at 130 feet across and weighing 300,000 tons hurtled into Earth's atmosphere at 26,800 miles per hour, 10 times faster than gunshot. Half of it slammed intact into what is now the northern Arizona desert, forming the crater. The rest fragmented before the collision, falling to the surface as a cloud of debris. Iron-rich meteorites weighing 1 to 1,000 pounds have been found in a 6-mile radius around the main impact site. Wow. Next we have Mesa Arch. Gorgeous. It looks like a bridge, but the 88-foot-long Mesa Arch in southwestern Utah's Canyonlands National Park is a pothole arch, created not by running water but by weathering and erosion. Water accumulated in a small depression in a sandstone mesa known as the Island in the Sky. Over time, the depression was enlarged by weathering and erosion into a larger pothole, undercutting more resistant rock at the cliff edge and eventually forming what is now thought to be the most photographed natural arch in the world. Although pothole arches survive for thousands of years, they do eventually collapse. However, seismic research in 2015 indicated that Mesa Arch is stable for now. Next we have Antelope Canyon, which this doesn't look real. This looks just like painting, just like smudged colors, right? This is a real place in the world. Antelope Canyon. In northern Arizona lies one of the American Southwest's most visited canyons, but few passing drivers know that it exists. This is because, unlike most other canyons whose broad gorges open to the sky, Antelope Canyon is a slot canyon, also called narrows. Slot canyons have nearly vertical, twisting walls divided by fissures that can be just a handspan's width at the surface, yet plunge downward for thousands of feet. A tale of two canyons. Antelope Canyon was discovered in 1931 on land owned by the Navajo Nation. It twists and turns beneath the desert for 5 miles. Some sections are only a few feet wide, but can be 120 feet or more deep. The canyon has two parts. Lower Antelope Canyon, known in Navajo as I'm not going to try spiral rock arches, and Upper Antelope Canyon, or the place where water runs through rocks. The spiral pattern chambers have been created by running water, but the process has been intermittent. Over millennia, the local red Navajo sandstone has been subjected not to constant scouring from a river, but to rare yet violent flash floods. Whenever the nearby Antelope Creek overflows, water forces its way through the desert surface via tiny cracks. Rocks and other debris carried by the floods help carve out the rainbow-colored corridors. Where the canyon widens enough to allow in sunlight, winds blow in sand, abrading the walls and changing the patterns in the floor levels. So, that's what it looks like from above, which is why it wasn't discovered for so long. It's so beautiful. And lastly tonight, we have the Chihuahuan Desert. Bisected by the Rio Grande, the Chihuahuan Desert is bordered to the west and east by the Sierra Madre Occidental and Oriental. It is a rain-shadow desert, formed because the mountains block the flow of moisture-laden air from coastal waters. Highlight. Most of the desert lies at an altitude of about 4,500 feet, making the summer slightly milder than in other deserts, although daytime temperatures still exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The nights can be cold, with snow at higher elevations. Despite such extremes, more than 3,500 plant species flourish here, including more cacti species than in any other desert. While higher slopes are characterized by thick-leaved, frost-hardy yuccas, shrubs such as mesquite and creosote bush dominate the lower region. Such varied habitats support a wide range of wildlife, including bats, roadrunners, and tarantulas. A surprising number of fish are able to survive in pools and oases. Look at the world's largest gypsum dune field. And there's a little spiky cactus. So I hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. Next time we read this, we'll read about Central and South America. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good